Hello, welcome back to Rido Forging. Today, I'm going to make good on my promise that I made in the last video. We're going to try forging a grounding rod. And so I got a couple chunks of it. Right here. And this stuff was a royal bitch to cut. It is incredibly high carbon. Really doesn't like to get cut with an angle grinder, so we're going to try and avoid to do this again. First test I'm going to do, I'm going to just take this, heat it up, quench it. See how it handles it, see what it does. Then this one, I'm going to hammer on, see if I can maybe even forge weld. We're going to screw around with this one, it's going to be a lot of fun. Hope you enjoy. Alright, so for the first time on Rido Forging, we're going to light the forge. We're lit. I'm gonna throw the piece in the forge. Son of a bitch, the thing keeps rolling all over the place. New plan, we're gonna light the forge with the thing already in it, so hopefully that'll result in less screwing up. Ladies and gentlemen, we have achieved lit forge. Piece is in the forge, it's getting hot. For the record, this piece is not going to get hot enough for a proper steel quenching temperature, because if we got it that hot, then the copper would melt and that would be bad. So we're gonna keep it at more of a copper annealing temperature than a steel quenching temperature. I'm going for the quench. Look at that. So that is the quenched piece. It's sort of hard to tell right now, and it's still too hot to get a good look at, so I'm gonna let this cool down for a while, and we'll take a look at it. Also, you may not have been able to see it at the time, but in the forge, the steel and copper, it made this incredible iridescent bright orange color, and it was really cool to look at. So, I kind of wish I had the camera over there, but then it would have been a pain in the ass, so sorry about that. I'll try and get a shot with the next piece. Alright, so the piece is probably cooled by now, but better safe than sorry, so crucible gloves. Whoa. It's safe to touch. And it's actually very interesting. It's kind of difficult to see, but if you can see that, it created almost, it looks like a bubble in the copper. Which is really cool. Because I originally thought that lump was just some slag from the forge, but apparently it's not. It's actually copper. So by annealing the copper while hardening the steel, it did weird things. Honestly, this isn't particularly surprising that it did something weird. But this weird thing is quite interesting. The way it bubbled like that, I can't say I was expecting that. Alright, so I took some rough grit sandpaper to this, and you can see more of that sort of coppery color where it sort of bubbled up, and it's really interesting when you look at it, because I'm pretty sure it's only the copper that bubbled up, but I'd have to grind it down to figure out if anything else did, so I might do that at some point, but right now I want to get down to trying to hammer on this really cool material, so let's do it. Alright, the forge is now lit, we're waiting for it to heat up, and then we're going to start pounding on it. Exactly the problem I expected. I heat it up and I go to hit on it, but I'm getting the outside copper hot, and so I don't want to get it too hot, but the inside steel is still fairly cold, and only the outer layers of it are actually bending, so it's not forging uniformly. I'm going to get it a little bit hotter and try it again. Still having the same problem. I'm going to try getting it a little bit hotter. It's hard to gauge how hot the copper is because it doesn't really glow orange the same way the steel does. There's no real good indication to go off of. That's actually starting to work a little bit better now. I think I'm getting it into that heat range that I need to work it, so we're gonna keep working on it. A bit of a problem with some of the copper actually melting, so that's regrettable. I'm gonna see if I can flatten it on one side. there's this really weird effect when I pull the thing out of the forge. I think it's the copper doing something, because I pull it out and there's like this black sheen that runs over it. It's not an oxidation or anything. It's just the color change from inside the forge to outside, and it's really neat. Actually not half bad to work now. This is cool. I did not think this was gonna work half as well as it has. We're gonna keep drawing it out though. To cool off very quickly because the center of the steel isn't getting hot, so it's not moving very well. Oh, that is so Look at that. That is thinned out. Copper and steel. Move the camera to see if we can get a shot of that. Let's see if we can get a passable shot. Not sure if that's actually showing up on the camera, but I hope so, because it's really cool. Ladies and gentlemen, I do believe we've just forge welded copper and steel. Yeah! Alright, I think I'm gonna... I just accidentally left the copper in too long and bad things happened. It near melted, I pulled it out, hit it, and it like frayed the copper on it. I'm gonna go for a heat treat now. We're gonna see what that does. I'm not overly optimistic now. I've also got a bit of molten copper on the bottom of my forge, so that's gonna be a bitch to clean off. About to go in for it. Alrighty, we're successfully quenched, hopefully. We're not sure if it's successful, so we're gonna take it out. I'm gonna leave it in there for a minute, let it cool off, and then we'll be able to check it out. So just taking a look at this thing, I'm not seeing as much of the bubbling as on the smaller one. I'm seeing some minor bubbling. The piece at the end, I'm not seeing too much. There's a weird sort of lump there, but I think that might just be a fragment of molten copper, because I kind of effed everything up at the end there. There's some weird slag on it. I think that's just from the forge. But we're gonna wait until this cools down, and then I'm gonna grind off the end, and we're gonna see if I've successfully managed to forge weld any of it. So, let's see. I would just like to make clear that I'm not advising anyone to do this at home. It's kind of a recipe to F up the bottom of your forge and also your anvil if you screw up the heating, which I did, admittedly, so that's going to be a pain to deal with, but I don't think it's too bad, so probably just a couple lumps of molten copper on there. That's always fun. Alright, so the piece is successfully cooled down, so we can now get a closer look. I noticed right here, if you can see that is where the copper actually tore, or actually where some molten copper ended up. And I can just peel that and break that off with my fingers right now. This side looks a lot better. This side didn't get quite as mushed as the other side. There's a little sort of weird glob here, but I think that's some forged slag. Looking along the whole thing, it's now rough and bumpy, which could be some oxidation, but it looks like there are almost bubbles along there, if you can see that, if it's in focus at all. Yeah, and we've got quite a bit of the bubbling here. Nothing to the same degree as on the smaller piece, so I think the size or the weight of the piece might have something to do with it. Alright, time to grind. Did I mention that stuff is a bitch to cut? It's a real bitch to cut. I also don't want to touch that thing because it's probably 2 million degrees. Alright, so I'm not entirely sure if that was a success or failure. The layer of copper is really thin. I ground it away, but you can't actually see any copper around it. So what I want to do is I want to flatten it down, I want to bring that back, and then I want to go for a fold. So, yeah. Let's do this thing. You notice I'm being super cautious about my heating. I don't want to overheat it at all, or underheat it for that matter. Making progress. It's moving, honestly, surprisingly easily. Fortunately, I'm not seeing any globs on the bottom of the forge, so that is a good sign. Scratch that. Not many globs. back up really nicely once you have some heat in it. I'm gonna attempt the fold in a minute. Metal is in the forge. Fold, ladies and gentlemen. We have a fold. Now I just need to close it up. The forge is closed, the fold is closed. Now I have to set the weld. This is gonna be fun. Copper's starting to get gummy. I hold it in the tongs and it causes problems. Weld's not setting very well because A, the piece is kind of a mess, and B, I don't know that I'm getting it hot enough. I'm not sure how you forge weld copper, honestly. I'm just trying to treat it like steel, because I'm trying to weld copper to copper, and I don't know how to do that, so we're winging it. Thus far, this hasn't been working so well, but I have a backup plan. Big ass sledgehammer. I'm gonna try to get the piece as hot as I dare without melting it, and then I'm just gonna wail on it with this thing. Well, much as I can. Not exactly a big guy, so this may or may not work well. This is it, though. It's mushing, but I don't know that it's welding. Switch back to my lighter hammer and try and hit it on the edge, but I don't know if it's gonna work. Oh! It's splitting on the far side, but it's looking more homogeneous. This might actually work. I know we're close, I know. Forge is starting to die down. I only have about a minute left. Alright, time to shut her down. Well, this has been fun. We have a piece. It may have forge welded at the ends, but throughout most of it, it's not forge welded, but we'll just have to see. I'm gonna chuck it in the bucket and see if that splits it or anything. Alright, I'm gonna leave that in there to cool down for a while. Then we're gonna see how it turned out. So, more grinding! Whee! Alright, forge is off for the day. I have the piece here. You can see it sorta split on the end there. But I managed to hammer it together at the front. There seems to be a little splitting, but I'm not sure if that's just superficial or if that runs all the way through, because I think I may have gotten a bit of a forge weld on there. Not much, but maybe a bit. Maybe enough to look at and see. So, we're just gonna have to grind it. It should be fun. Here we go. Time to grind this and see if it welded at all, or at least looks cool. Yes! Yes! Yes, it worked. It worked. It didn't work entirely, but it worked on a small bit of it. The outside copper did weld to the steel, which I'm ecstatic about. And the inside copper, there's a small bit right at the bend where it did weld. The rest of it did not weld, but it looks awesome. So it's fine. I'm gonna cool that off, I'm gonna clean it up, and I'll be back. Alright, so we're now at the indoor section of my workshop. This is my sort of metal desk that I got here. I get my camera parts and shit over there. Got a light. But most importantly, we have the copper pieces that we worked on. So, we'll start with this small one. And if you take a look, here's that bubble that I was pointing out earlier. That looks really neat. You can really see the way the copper, like, against the steel when the steel was quenched. Like, I'm not honestly sure how it happened or how it actually works. Also, if you hear some scratching in the background, that's my cat. She's a lunatic. Sorry about that. Yeah, you can see the copper around the steel. And you can see here there's not any problems on the edge, which means that these two can be quenched together, but they do have a tendency to form weird blobs like that, which is kind of interesting, and I'm not sure why. But then, the piece de résistance, if I am saying that properly in perfect fucking French, we have this. This is the side I didn't grind. You can see here it's sort of homogenized at the end, but doesn't work great.
But the metal thinned out nicely, and most importantly, the copper and the steel themselves did not have an issue. And then we have the most interesting things, which is right here. Look at this. Look at the copper and the steel of the edges. They're melded. That's a forge weld, I'm pretty sure. There might be something else at play, but as best I can tell, there is a forge weld between copper and steel. Also, my second forge weld that I attempted between the two copper layers worked in a spot, but you can see it start to split. Right about there, you can see it start to split apart, and then it just grows into there. But we have successfully forge welded, officially, copper to copper, and more importantly, steel to copper. I have a feeling that with quite a bit more practice and better equipment, I could make a neat form of Damascus from this, or more interestingly, I could use this bar stock, or the grounding wire, and I could use that to draw out into a knife that would have a steel edge, while on the sides appearing copper, which would be absolutely awesome. So, thanks for watching, and I believe that'll be all. See you next time, while I continue my ride of forging.